warmly welcome you to the inaugural ceremony of the 8th International Conference on Humanities and Social Sciences 2023, IRCHSS. And I invite the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, Professor Shirantha Heenkenda, a leader who constantly leads with encouragement, to address the gathering.
Good morning, Venerable Mahasangha, the Chief Guest, the Vice Chancellor, the Deans of the faculties, the keynote speaker and the plenary speakers, the Registrar of this university, the professors, lecturers, the librarian, other academic and non-academic staff members, all the scholars and the participants of the conference, and ladies and the gentlemen. It is a great honor for me to deliver this speech as the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences on behalf of the 8th International Conference on Humanities and Social Sciences 2023 of the University of Sri Jayewardenepura, Sri Lanka. Organizing this conference for the 8th time since its successful inception in 2012 is the noteworthy considering a dedication of the conference to be dissemination of knowledge and contribute to the rich research culture and heritage in the field of humanities and social sciences. This year, the conference theme, Seen Through the Testing Time and the Future, was specially selected as Sri Lanka is at present facing unprecedented challenges faced by the current economic crisis in the country. Thus, diverse viewpoint and the perception which address such a national concern are given the predominant focus at the IRCHSS 2023 in time of such unpredictable challenges. It is vital for academia to develop a positive outlook towards the future by staying informed, motivated, and productive, be adapted and resilient. Build network with diverse scholars, organization, industries, and the most importantly, plan for the future. Research can also play a significant role in helping individuals and organizations see through the testing time and prepare for the future. By leveraging research and using it is inform our decision making, we can see through the testing time and prepare for the bright and prosperous future. Thus, organizing an international conference of this caliber is a significant as it is help to fulfilling such objective in diverse ways. In times of uncertainty and challenges, it is essential to stay optimistic and look forward the future. Here are some tips for the seen through the testing times and preparing for the future. Stay informed. So very important to keep up to date latest news and trends in our industry or sector. This can help us to anticipate challenge and the plan accordingly. Number 2, be adaptable. Be prepared to adapt and change circumstances and be fixed our approaches. Number 3, focus on what you can control. Identifying the things that are within our control and the focus our energy on them. This can help us to stay motivated and productive even in the challenging circumstances. Number 4, build resilience. Develop our resilience by building our mental and emotional strength. Collaborative and network. Build strong relationship with others in our industry or sector and the collaborative on project or initiatives. This can help us stay concerned and share ideas and the resources. Number 6, embrace technology. Embracing technology and use it your advantages, explore new tools and platforms that can help us work more effectively and efficiently. Number 7, plan for the future. Develop a long-term plan and set goals for the future. This can help us to stay focused and motivated even in the challenging time. Therefore, I am certain that this year IRCHSS 2023 has managed to provide a fruitful platform to share valuable insight to make informed decision grounded in the data and the evidence, and offer ample opportunity to collaborate and network with other organizations, researcher and expert in the field of humanities and social sciences. Finally, I wish all the very best to the organizing committee, all the presenters, and the participants to make IRCHSS 2023 a great success.
The Acting Vice Chancellor of the University of Sri Jayewardenepura, our guest of honor, Professor Upul Subasinghe, will now address the gathering.
අතිපූජ්‍ය මාගම්මන පඤ්ඤානන්ද මහාචාර්ය නායක ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ ඇතුළු මේ අවස්ථාවට වැඩම කර සිටින සංඝරත්නයන් අවසරයි. Our chief guest, Mr. Tatsuya Yamada, Chief Representative to Sri Lanka Office, JICA, Emeritus Professor Rajiv Vijayasinghe, Professor Shirantha Hinkenda, Dean, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, all other deans of other faculties, Senior Professor Padmalal, Senior Professor Surangi, Professor Nimal, Professor Pradeep and Professor Prasad, and fellow academics, our registrar, Mr. Anuruddha Valivita, librarian Dr. Nayana Vijayasundara, and all the administrative and non-academic staff, distinguished invitees, participants and presenters. First, I'd like to thank the organizing committee and the Dean of the faculty for inviting me to this 8th conference. And also, I'd like to commend the organizing committee for having the burden to make this event a reality in this most difficult time of the country with a lot of crisis, financial crisis and other restrictions as well. We all know that we are experiencing a very different and difficult path as Sri Lankans today, which we never experienced and we never expected in our life. But every dark cloud has a silver line, so that there is a hope. Because most of the countries, especially Japan, for example, they raised and gained their fame within the crisis situations. Once you face crisis, which I believe, we have to rethink our strategies, we have to reorganize, we have to refocus and regain what we lost during the fast and beyond. And where the solutions are lying, solutions are lying with the scholars, research, universities and relevant institutes. Therefore, organizing this kind of events is very much essential in this kind of era. And also the theme is very much in line with the present crisis, seen through testing times and the future, because we are being tested. We are being badly tested at this moment, so that we have to see the future with our capabilities. And also the tracks selected by the organizers, varying from Buddhism, geography, environment to governance, are also essential, because the development is not relying only on the technology and the machines, but also on the attitude change and the change of thinking patterns. Therefore, I sincerely hope the policymakers and the implementers will take up the important solutions which are presented in this conference seriously and utilize them for the betterment of our country. And also, I urge the scholars to publish their present findings in full in relevant and important journals, so that the people who are looking for such information can gather those and utilize them for their future activities as well. Finally, I wish this conference a great success, and again I hope that the relevant policymakers will utilize the information presented here. Thank you very much.
Our chief guest this morning, Mr. Tetsuya Yamada, Chief Representative of JICA Sri Lanka, symbolizes the long-standing friendship between Japan and Sri Lanka. We are honored by your presence, sir, and we cordially invite you to address the gathering.
Venerable Mahasangha, Professor Upul Subasinghe, Vice Chancellor, University of Sri Jayewardenepura, Professor Emeritus Vijay Sinha, Professor Shiranta Hikanda, Dean, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, Dr. Taranga Weerasuriya, Chair of IRCHSS 2023, all the faculty members of USJ, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Suba Udasanak, good morning. It is my great honor and privilege to attend the inauguration ceremony of the 8th International Research Conference on Humanities and Social Sciences. As you may know, last year we celebrated the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relationship between Japan and Sri Lanka. The long-standing unconditional friendly relationship started with the famous words of J.R. Jayawardena at the San Francisco Peace Conference in 1951 after the Second World War, citing Lord Buddha's famous quote, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but by love." And he called upon international society for waiving the reparation and supporting Japan to get back to the international community as sovereign nation. This is nothing but the biggest helping hand and unconditional support that Sri Lanka had offered to Japan, that Japan has ever got in its history. Japan still owes much to Sri Lanka and its people for the true friendship and support that still affects our day-to-day life, even after several generations from the peace conference. Since then, Japan has implemented a lot of cooperation projects with Sri Lanka in many fields, and JICA has proudly been the central vehicle to plan and implement those projects. The cumulative total number of Sri Lankan trainees that participated in JICA training courses in various fields stands at over 14,000 now. And we have a strong alumni association of these ex-trainees in Sri Lanka. We have made over 2.8 trillion Sri Lankan rupees of loan commitments, mainly for various infrastructure development projects. But I think one of the most effective cooperation that we have been able to do is investing in people, education sector cooperation, because it could have an infinite return on investment, of course, depending on the way that investees make use of those results of the education, though. With regard to the relationship with the prestigious University of Sri Jayewardenepura, we have also worked in various fields. For example, we provided grant assistance in the late 1990s to provide educational equipment for the Faculty of Medicine, Medical Sciences. And even as early as 1986 and 1989, some 45 years back, and it was during the wartime in Sri Lanka, we had 2 young JICA volunteers stationed in USJ teaching Japanese language. Speaking about the Japanese language, I must also note that the USJ recently started a new degree program of Bachelor of Arts honors degree in Japanese language in February last year. It is especially remarkable that USJ made an utmost effort to offer new opportunities for the young generation, even in the middle of this crisis. JICA is also planning to dispatch a new JICA volunteer to USJ to teach Japanese language starting this August. I am also fortunate that I recently witnessed another example of USJ working very hard to give young generation, particularly for those who have disabilities, an opportunity to work after graduation. JICA is currently working together with Sri Lankan government on a project called Empowerment Support for Persons with Disabilities, ESPD, to promote job opportunities for persons with disabilities, whereas USJ is joining as one of those ESPD members. Under the project, we successfully conducted job matching for 29 persons with disabilities with 25 companies. out of which 4 USJ graduates got a job at leading private companies. In this regard, I would like to thank Professor Shiranta Hirkanda for his personal dedication and enthusiastic contribution that he made to support this endeavor, and to attend the recent awarding ceremony of our appreciation certificate for this remarkable achievement. The education sector in Sri Lanka has largely been negatively affected during the past 3 years for COVID-19, as well as the recent economic and political and social crisis. Schools got closed for a long period of time. Not only the educational function, but also the university's research function has got negative impact as well. But I believe that the research function, that given this important roles of academe in terms of educational and research functions, we can never let any kind of crisis stop the university from running. In this sense, I would like to commend the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences of USJ for maintaining its research function of the university and for having an important event like this, international research conference, even during this toughest time. In this world of VUCA, great vulnerability, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and in this time of unprecedented crisis in Sri Lanka, it has never been more important than ever to gather the wisdom, knowledge, and experiences of academics and scholars to overcome this crisis. And I believe if we can properly learn from the academics and scholars to reflect their wisdom to make a right choice and decision based on scientific evidence, then we'll be able to get this beautiful country back on track of its growth trajectory. In concluding my remarks, let me wish all of you a successful conference, and I would like to express our renewed firm commitment to continue working hard to cooperate with this prestigious University of Sri Jayewardenepura and its members of the university community. Thank you very much all. Bohama Stuti Nandri.
Our keynote speaker this morning, Professor Emeritus Rajiva Vijayasinghe, needs no introduction, for he is a locally and internationally renowned scholar and educationist. Nevertheless, we are delighted to officially introduce our keynote speaker this morning. To so present the official citation of our keynote speaker and invite the keynote speaker to deliver the keynote speech, I cordially invite Dr. Madhubhashini Disanayaka Ratnayaka on stage.
I'm not sure whether this is going to be an official citation. I'm pretty sure Rajiva is not, because I'm going to speak about Rajiva, the person I know, and who has influenced me from childhood, because it's very relevant to what the Vice Chancellor also said today. Practice. Just researching, just doing our research is not enough. Put it into practice. And Professor Rajiva Vijayasinghe is one of those people who have showed me, since I stepped out of school, how very effective that is. He's an extremely good scholar. He has written many books. He's still writing. But he's one of those people who break all molds when it comes to making a difference. And in his case, it is teaching English as a second language in Sri Lanka, which has many problems and which we need to think of new ways of doing. And Rajiva is a pioneer in having done that in this country, because his GELT course, which I think that's how I first knew him, we did simplified readers. Rajiva figured out that you need books, and you need affordable books for people to read if we are going to teach them English. Because you cannot just teach grammar, you cannot restrict yourself to classrooms and expect a difference. It doesn't happen. So Rajiva pioneered a scheme. He was at the British Council at that time, so he could find funding. He pioneered a scheme in which low-cost books, 100 rupees, 150, maybe even cheaper, I think, available all across the country to every school child who got into campus. Amazing stuff at that time. Also, he was one of the first people to give credit to Sri Lankan English literature. Before he came in the English departments, we studied Victorian writers, we studied Shakespeare, but he was the one who said, no, there is also Sri Lankan writers who are worth studying. And he was at Peradeniya, I think at that time, he just got it done. Of course, Rajiva is such an explosive change maker. He also shifts around quite a lot because it's difficult to handle him sometimes. And Rajiva, when he cannot get his way, leaves. And I have always fought him about that problem. But wherever he has gone, he has made such a difference that Sri Lanka has become different because of him, something that we might forget. So the Sri Lankan English literature being accepted in university is something that he did. Gales course, something that he did. And with Rajiva, the thing is, he never stops. Now, he has introduced me a couple of times the last few months, so I'm extremely pleased to do it for him today. Thank you, Tharanga, for giving me that chance. And he's still fighting, he's still changing. And the last thing he tried to do was, as the chairman of the tertiary education commission or something, where he tried to teach English to everyone, mechanics downwards or upwards, whatever. Because he said they need to know English to become stronger, to be more confident, and he kept on trying to do that. And again, when you try to make so many differences, you might, for political reasons, have to leave. And again, that happened to Rajiva. So I'll just stop by saying, one of the greatest ways I see right now in this country is that he's not being made to do what he can do. And I'm extremely pleased, Rajiva, you're here. And I welcome you very warmly to the University of Sri Jayewardenepura, where you have worked, just like Sabaragamuwa and like Peradeniya. The English department was part of his work. He is one of the pioneers in getting people without English A-level literature into English departments, and we have results. Dr. Tharanga Weerasinghe, Dr. Sujeeva Hettiarachchi, Dr. Sampath Pushpakumara, who I'm very, very proud of. All these people were created by the bravery of people like Professor Rajiva Vijayasinghe. So welcome, Rajiva, and I'm looking forward to hearing you now. Thank you.
Vice Chancellor, Dean, our chief guest, the academics here, and I was going to say my former colleagues, but I look around and I see only 2 people who were teaching here when I was here. It shows you perhaps how time passes, perhaps how very old I now am. And that is why, complimented though I am, Madhu, it is time for me to sit back a bit and hope that people like you and Tharanga and Lalit, the 2 Anandas, will take on all the challenges that this country faces. At the beginning of this year, I read again, after well over half a century, a delightful book by John Masefield. It's a children's book, but I am rapidly reverting to second childhood, and I much enjoy such reading. It was called The Box of Delights. A feature of this box was that it allowed one to travel swiftly and to make oneself very small. And it struck me then that those magical properties are what are needed for us to do better in the field of English language teaching. Those who make the running must move very, very quickly, because there's no time to waste. And they must be able to think like the young do, the very young, but also all those students who need to be motivated to learn. If you don't think the way they do, they will not learn. Unfortunately, all efforts to take things forward have to contend with the blockages imposed by the equivalent of Masefield's Coven of Witches. In an earlier novel, The Midnight Folk, they have now turned sanctimonious as potential churchmen in the Box of Delights. And that happens to witches. They actually turn into pillars of society and work very sanctimoniously to destroy everyone else. Who these are in real life, and I know people are waiting for me to name names, but I'll try to be good today and not name names. It varies from generation to generation. But what they have in common is slowness of thought and execution, and an incapacity to think except as adults, and sometimes not even that. Thought is sometimes very far from the minds before they move to action. At the end of last year, I came to this university to celebrate a welcome initiative on the part of our library together with Madhubhashini, who is now in the English language teaching department, the first major contribution to English language teaching, or learning as I prefer to name it, since the 90s, 30 years. In that decade too, personnel at this university played a major role to take things forward. And I was happy to learn that those now too in authority here, like your dean, have given unstinting support to the innovations your colleagues are trying to introduce nationwide, not only here. But remember that the midnight folk are always waiting to pounce, the negative ones, though I should know that Macefield also thinks of the little people who help as midnight folk, working with their lights under a bushel. And it was remarkable to see how much Madhubhashini had inspired little people all over the country, in libraries, in the northern province in particular. But it was also sad to see how those in officialdom have not moved things forward as swiftly as could have been done. 3 months have passed, and I'm afraid things are not moving quickly. I may be wrong, reassure me. Let me now speak briefly of those initiatives of the 90s, but this may seem an arrogant move since I was, as Madhu says, central to the developments of those days. But I should make this clear that nothing would have been possible without not just strong but imaginative support from many others, including 2 fantastic practitioners of English language teaching at this university, Parvati Nagasundaram and Orani Jayans. Interestingly, the latter was not initially enthusiastic about the former joining the university because she was a strong proponent of autonomy for the English language teaching unit and resented what she thought was potential interference by a recruit to what was then the Department of Languages and Cultural Studies. The then Vice-Chancellor, who was in despair about the English unit, had expressed the view that Paru should be appointed to head the ELTU, but there was such opposition to this amongst some of the witchers that the incumbent, who had resigned, reassumed the position to keep Paru out. But Orani, who was a great lady, full of generosity to her colleagues, and I should mention that initially the Vice-Chancellor wanted her to head the ELTU, and all the other ladies screamed and stopped it, because Orani was an indefatigable worker, and the other ladies were not. Some of you, Sarat and Lalitananda, may remember the little old ELTU and the little room in which the ladies used to sit and drink tea all day without going to class. See, I haven't mentioned any names. But Orani never stopped working. And when there was opposition on racist grounds, and I'm sorry to say Jayewardenepura had a certain element of racism back in the 90s, I think that has changed now, from other members of the ELT, she not only supported Paru, but took another Tamil recruit whom the other ladies were attacking, they were calling him a tiger, to work with her in the medical faculty. Her imaginative approach meant that USJP medical students were accepted much sooner than by the medical hierarchy than graduates from other new medical faculties. Because as you know, the establishment in this country belittles any new medical faculty. So when Kalaniya started, Peradeniya and Colombo jumped on it and tried to really drive it into the grave. When Jayewardenepura started, they tried to shout at Jayewardenepura and say, how can you run a faculty? You don't have any staff. Jayewardenepura had excellent medical staff. But Orani, by also doing English, made your graduates soon accepted than elsewhere. This was not a benefit that Ruhuna and Rajarata had. Not quickly enough. But I think, although that happened and every new university joined the old universities in belittling the newer ones, now all those suffered persecution, but that mentality has changed, I think, because Sabaragamu has not had to face quite as bad belittling. There's still a bit, but it's not as bad as what Kalani and Jayewardenepura faced, or Rajarata. At the time I was Minister of Higher Education, the Rajarata students were in despair, telling me how they were scorned by other universities. My return to the state system was because of an initiative by Arjuna Alivihara, the best UG chairman we have ever had, to extend opportunities in tertiary education, and do this especially with regard to English. Typically, the midnight folk sniffed at this, anguished at the thought of English being made available at tertiary level to students who had not done English at advanced level, namely to students outside the charmed circle of Colombo and Kandy and Jaffna, which had already begun to decline sadly. After all, as one professor put it, when earlier I had suggested syllabus revision to incorporate Sri Lankan writing in English, her students could go to Cambridge for postgraduate work. This was to her what English degrees were about. Though in actual fact, no one from that university, or indeed any other in Sri Lanka, had gone there for postgraduate work for 2 decades. But that was the standard she thought to uphold, a mythical Cambridge golden age. And it was USJP who took up the challenge to the then Dean of Arts, Mahinda Paliyawardena, who roped me in. And I was absolutely delighted to see in the books you all gave me today a book by Mahinda Paliyawardena, who was really Dean of Arts at the time. And when I was asked to work with Jayewardenepura, I wasn't quite sure. So I asked one of the greatest gentlemen I know, who happened to be Madhubhashini's father, J.B. Dissanayaka. When I said this, the Vice Chancellor said, "SB?" Obviously horrified at the idea of that gentleman saying anything sensible. But J.B. told me that Mr. Palihawardena was the greatest gentleman he knew. And it is such a pleasure to see that you have republished his book in 2019. Because he was a great scholar as well as a great gentleman. But he roped me in and then persuaded me to stay because that was essential since he was about to retire. And so I not only took charge of the English diploma course at 6 affiliated universities, general English at 5 others, but also tried to transform English of this university, including an English language component in addition to English literature. And this was available also in the external degree we started, which soon became the most popular external degree in the whole university system. Now, when I say I did this, it was because of the wonderful support I had, and in time, Paru Nagasundaram expanded on this, established an English department, and I should say, Madhu, grateful though I am, the names you mentioned are really her products. They were all wonderful people, but they studied under her, because by that time, I was gone. She also, when I requested this from the ministry, introduced English language teaching as a component of the external degree, which was a great boon to teachers nationwide. And at the turn of the century, the other universities refused, for they still believed pedagogical skills had nothing to do with academia. And I have tried so much to get them to introduce teaching. And all universities understand the skill for this, but not, with regard to English, but it is not penetrated to other schools. Whereas we need components of teaching mathematics in university mathematics degrees. I know this vividly because mathematics at school and mathematics at university are 2 entirely different things. I was, if I might boast a little, though I did arts, a whiz at mathematics and won all the mathematics prizes in school, up to the O-level. So I thought I'm very clever, I will do mathematics at A-level. I couldn't understand a thing. I just couldn't understand advanced level mathematics. My brain was not built for that. Trigonometry, calculus, beyond me. But in this country, if you have a mathematics degree, you are allowed to go into teaching, and your head is full of calculus and trigonometry, and the poor children don't understand what you're doing. It's a very simple fact, but this is not penetrated these skulls. You have to think as children do. And what I suggested, I told one of the best mathematics teachers I knew who, on my recommendation, he says, became head of the NIAIB. But he wouldn't move swiftly enough. I said, make all the universities introduce as an option the teaching of mathematics. Get them to think as children do. Increase the number of graduates who are willing to go into schools and teach simple mathematics. No, it's just not happening. And our poor teachers, you know, mathematics teaching is the pits in this Sri Lanka. The number of passers at O-level is terrible because there are no teachers. And it would be so easy to adjust this if you actually produced mathematics teachers as we produced English teachers. But no, it's not being thought of. Successive ministers of education talk about this, but they will not think of the elementary measures needed to promote such education, namely to produce better teachers. And swiftly, as I started by saying, we must ensure with regard to all positive measures. And another little measure I think we really have to take to move quickly is to move to 3-year degrees. You know, I did this at Sabaragamuwa. There was vast animosity from the other universities who forced them to move to 4 years after I had left, supported by staff who wanted to spin out their time. But I'm very proud to say it's the products of my 3-year degree who are amongst the best teachers of English now. And it can easily be done. 3 years of solid work. And you know, you ask people and they tell you that no, 4-year degrees are what is accepted. Even the UGC people don't understand that in England, it's 3-year degrees. Why? Because they have a very advanced level. And ours is very advanced, more advanced than the English one. 4-year degrees suit America, where they don't really have good secondary education for the maths. So they have 1 year in which they do a lot of core courses. But we persist with 4-year degrees everywhere. After 2 years of solid A-level, when even England accepts some of our people after A-level with a little bit of relief. But no, 4 years spins things out. Ridiculous distinctions between special and general degrees. Absurd. And we continue with this because no one has the guts to change. Okay, I have spoken so far of the colleagues I work with in the university system to change things in the 60s after half a century of moribundity as to tertiary level English. But there were other tools necessary to take things forward. The most important of these were materials, and materials that could be made readily available for students to own them and work with them on their own. I don't think any of you will remember the days when we had to buy textbooks, schools. And you could annotate the textbooks. You could write in them. You can't do that now because the state gives you textbooks and takes them back. You don't even have the option of buying them. And this is an area in which what I call the midnight folk had a very baneful impact because they didn't believe in materials which students could use on their own. They thought education demands power in the hands of the teacher. So materials are not easy to understand. They had to be explicated further. This meant enormous profits for those who produced materials, books prepared by teams whose members vied to impress each other rather than produce what students could readily understand. I have used this example before. Secondary school English textbooks in the 80s used to make students learn 4 forms of the future. And they would ask them, should you use this form or that form? And they'd get rapped on the knuckles if they used the wrong form. And my friends in England said, what 4 forms of the future? We've never heard of these. In fact, it's wrong. There are only 2 forms of the future, and the other 2 are presents with future markers. But no, our learned ignoramuses in the Ministry of Education created 4 forms. That doesn't matter. And they shouted at the children if they said, I go to school tomorrow instead of I am going to school tomorrow. That is not education. That is pedantics. And then, since the students couldn't really understand this, they produced teachers' guides, which also had to be studied, and only by the teacher. Heaps and heaps of things being produced at massive cost. And who was making the money? Okay? And the fact is, these did not always reach students and teachers in time, because the more remote the area, the greater where the need was, the greater the delay in transmission. So this meant nothing in which the production of materials and the money made of them through allowances for preparation and contracts for printing and meetings to adjust things was an end in itself, with little thought for the people who had to use these. And this still continues. I tried to transform this using a system I had instituted while at the British Council, where fortunately those in charge accepted my argument that we needed to develop the reading habit. And we could best do this by producing low-cost readers. And Madhu, you were right, they were not 100 and 150. The first we produced cost 5 rupees, just 5 rupees, which meant they got snapped up by students all over the country. And then we could reprint without further subsidy. We produced well over 50 titles before I joined USGP, and they've been produced dozens more which were made available to students, some at just 10 rupees. Of course, I was accused of making money for this. But the students who had initially objected to paying materials, provoked by the midnight folk who did not like such a successful program in this empowerment, the students who are intelligent agreed that 10 rupees simply covered costs, and that having got money from the Canadians who were very supportive to publish the first copies, I was not going to go begging again to them. What a contrast with our governments. If you know now, if you look at what is happening in this country now, we have borrowed heaps of money, and the big question is, are we going to be able to successfully beg for more money? And if we get more money, which has to be paid back, there'll be screams of triumph by the Colombo middle classes to say, gosh, what a wonderful government we have borrowed more money. And when we have to pay it back next year, they'll say, oh, well, we'll borrow even more money. And it will continue and continue and continue, whereas no measures are taken to actually empower the people on whose behalf this money is borrowed. Conspicuous consumption on borrowed money. That is what this country has engaged in, and that is all that is happening now. You read the papers today, triumph at the idea of being able to borrow more money. Not a word is said about cutting costs. Not a word is said about generating revenue, not only through taxes. I personally don't think some of the taxes are bad, but in a context in which the cost of living has shot up, you need to be careful. But there are other ways of generating revenue. I've actually done a series of articles in the Daily News, which actually publishes most of them with judicious little bits cut out. I can't blame them. I have to congratulate the editor for actually, which shows how easily money can be saved. I mean, I was horrified to find ministers justifying heaps of vehicles and the most expensive ones, and massive fuel allowances. When I was minister, I had 14 vehicles. I shan't mention who the minister was before me, who had 14 vehicles, and I cut them down to 2. I wanted 1, but my driver bullied me into taking 2. And the minute I returned them, the cabinet ministers, relations came to collect all the vehicles. I mean, how can you go on like this? Anyway, to go back. Over the years, I have been responsible for well over 1 million books for language learning snapped up by students all over the country. But I had wonderful collaborators, Nirmala Hettiarachchi, Sibyl Wettasinger, so marvelous, Madhu Varshini herself, Nirmala and Janaki Galapati, and a team of university academics and the ELTU head for tertiary level work. Because for GELT, we produced lovely readers, including in the sciences. And it taught me a lot. Simplified versions of science for kids to read. And we made everyone read everything. Okay? Rinley Fernando, who was here then, Rob de Silva of Morato University. We used these materials, refined further when Nora and I were asked to take charge of the GELT course, where we changed the term general English language teaching, general language training, because we were also concerned to introduce soft skills. The first time in this country, and I pay tribute to Orani, who was behind it, not me, long before they became fashionable. And even though they're fashionable, there's no proper system to develop them nationwide. The life skills curriculum, which developed when I headed the National Academic Affairs Board of the National Institute of Education, was perverted to exclude this. With a change of minister, another of the midnight folk was appointed in my stead. And I'm afraid that same minister is again minister, and again talks of the need to introduce soft skills and to introduce English. And for 30 years, he has done nothing. Nothing to take things forward. This is the situation we're in. So the GELT materials produced are forgotten. Some of them were taken up by Cambridge University Press in India and prescribed at some Indian universities. But in this country, producing materials is a way of making money. And so, 3 years ago, the UGC asked about using our materials again. This was, and I will name names when I'm positive, Dr. Anand Jayawardenepura, I think, Vice Chancellor of Morato University, which is a good university. But then he was got rid of. Someone else took over. And all the individual universities demanded autonomy, and nothing went forward. So there's still no proper pre-university English course, a uniform one for the whole country that develops English and soft skills. So easy to do. Delay affected the curriculum reform I initiated when I chaired the NIE. I told the then Education Secretary Tara Namil to move immediately, but she was slow and diffident for once. 6 months later, she told me to go ahead, and we did, but then Chandrika Kumartunga lost a year of her presidency through carelessness. It was really bad the way she was deprived of 1 year, but she was stupid too, for various reasons. Can't blame her, she had been. And the new president and minister simply did not understand the need for continuity, and the vital changes we had embarked on were forgotten. But Mahinda Rajapaksa and Sushil Premchand, there, when I'm positive I name names, did continue with perhaps the most important initiative begun under Tara, English medium in secondary schools in the government system. That had begun in 2001, but was sabotaged by the new Prime Minister who arrived at the end of that year, and actually said, I told them to stop doing English medium. You all know who that is, even more exalted position now. But his minister, Karnasena Kodituakku, a former vice-chancellor whom you see there, was much more entitled. And he ignored his prime minister's instructions that he halt the program. And it continued. So we owe a lot to Karnasena Kodituakku, the only person who has successfully defied Ranil Wickremesinghe without being shot. Okay? But the teacher training program I had started, with support from Paru and Orani, had to stop. The NI took that over and completely destroyed the learner-friendly approach we had initiated. Because I used trainers like Paru, whom all of you know is just magnificent as a trainer. But the NI's hierarchy took over, and their great passion in life is formulas. 3 T's, 5 E's, I think there were 7 K's or something. You all know these. And this was gloriously asserted in a sentence that I'll read out. Also, the teacher should closely observe the children learning, identifying students' activities, disabilities, providing feedback, developing the learning capacities of the students, and making implements to extend the learning and teaching outside the classroom are some of the tasks expected from the teacher. As I commented on this in my book, English and Education, In Search of Equity and Excellence, it might seem churlish to cavil about the 2 main verbs in this sentence. I hope you noticed them. Well, this is not an instructional guide to English teachers, with 3 language editors who have doubtless been well paid for their pains or the lack of them. And this is produced to English teachers completely ungrammatical. Training was in the hands of the NI, it floundered. But the contract to produce books continued for 2 years, And the English Association was in charge of this, so a good foundation was laid. But after that, the ministry and NI took over, and the usual tedious stuff was reintroduced. Our efforts to introduce wider knowledge, creative thinking, were abandoned totally. I still remember how pleased I was when a rural teacher told me that one of his students in one of the little schools in Hambantota that had started English medium had told him when the war in Iraq broke out, "Sir, that was a River Valley civilization." Because we had introduced that concept. If you look at our books, they're all about how wonderful Anuradhapura is. You learn it year after year after year. But no one tells the students the reason Anuradhapura is so wonderful, and it's a magnificent civilization, is because it's unique. All other agricultural societies around the world that built up were river valley civilizations, working on floods from rivers. Reservoirs are uniquely ours at that period in time. That's not told to the children. They're just told Anuradhapura is magnificent without being told exactly how special Anuradhapura is. With the remarkable elements of the civilization that Sri Lanka had in Anuradhapura and Polonnaru. Students don't understand that. Instead, they're given the names of kings. And when I said, why isn't Elara there? Oh, he's not important. Who's important? Akbar 1 and Akbar 2 and Akbar 3. What is this? Okay. Our efforts to introduce wider knowledge were ignored. Unsurprising, given the ignorance I had found in those entrusted with textbooks at the NI. Once they produced a history syllabus which left out the French and the Industrial Revolutions in the whole grade span. Nothing about these seminal factors in modern civilization. But let me give you an extract of what the NI managed to produce. Read the story. "Hello, we are going to the zoo. Do you like to join us?" asked Sylvia. Who is Sylvia? What is she? "Sorry, I can't. I'm going to the library now. Anyway, have a nice time. Bye." So Sylvia went to the zoo with her parents. At the entrance, her father bought tickets. First, they went to see the monkeys. She looked at a monkey. It made a funny face and started swinging. Sylvia shouted, "He is swinging. Look now, it is hanging from its tail. It's marvelous." Monkeys usually do that. So it seems as the NIE, was my comment. Unfortunately, I cannot in a speech make clear the carelessness with regard to punctuation and spelling. Despite all this, English medium has survived, but that it could have done so much better is obvious from the continuing proliferation of private English medium schools. Charging money, it should be given free, especially to our rural students. Interesting, the former permanent secretary of the Ministry of Education, Dharmasiri Piris, whom I met after many years, reminded me that in the early 90s he had wanted me to work at the ministry to remedy the situation, but he had abandoned the effort when officials at the ministry opposed this. Understandable, because as you can see, I do not tolerate nonsense. Though Tara was made of sterner stuff and did make use of my services, 2 changes of regime before things could be consolidated meant that our children still get short shrift as far as English language learning is concerned. I've spoken thus far of English at university level and in schools, but I have also, as Madhu said, worked at English for vocational training. First, 30 years ago, when the World University of Service commissioned a basic textbook for those starting on vocational training, then more comprehensively when I chaired the Tertiary and Vocational Education Commission. And I was very touched when 20 years later, the wife of the Canadian High Commissioner, who had taken over the WUSC, World University Service, found a copy of my old English textbook basically for level 3 NVQ, very simple, and actually reproduced it. Because she also realized, and this wasn't me, it was the ADB that kept saying English is necessary for jobs, essential. So having discovered that what were termed NVQ levels 1 and 2, supposed to prepare youngsters for vocational training, hardly existed, I started career skills courses at those levels to develop other soft skills and in particular English capacity, and these rapidly became the most popular courses in the country. The Department of Technical Training and the Vocational Training Authority started level 1 and 2 because I had done a trawl. And I found that parents wanted something for their children to do in the fallow period after the ordinary level examination. Sri Lanka is the only country in the world that wastes the time of its youngsters by delaying the resumption of school. Only country in the world. And it's a boon to the tuition industry, which stopped any efforts to limit that waste, because it embarks on recruitment in January after the O-levels and hooks youngsters who are then held forever. And they never break away from tuition. You go to any advanced level school class in the country, it's half full, if that. Because they're all in tuition classes. This is the free education we have. Whereas if we started schools in January, the parents would not look desperately for what to do with their children and send them to tuition, and after that the students will not go back to school. Needless to say, when I was sacked, and from TVC Mother I was sacked. Not because my ideas were too good, but because I refused to appoint third-rate people the minister told me to put into the office. Now, I'm afraid I compromised. I said, if there are peons and drivers, I won't sit on the entertainment board, and so long as the basic qualifications, I don't mind you appointing them. But I am not having management trainees who don't even understand what the TVEC is. My father, when he was asked to find jobs for people, he would say, I can't find jobs, but send your children to me and I will tell them how to face an interview. They invariably got the job. I mean, this minister would send people who had never heard of the TVEC. Why, he had promised their parents he would give them jobs. So when I refused, I was sacked. The English courses were abolished. Successive ministers of education, who also now have charge of vocational education, bleat about the need for more English, but do nothing to promote this. They do not think of learning from the past. They try, and though they do not even reinvent the wheel, they simply talk about movement. It's very easy when you're not intending to travel and not to allow anyone else to travel, to talk about how quickly one should move. But they allow all means of transport to be dismantled, with parents and children who have been left in the lurch, turning, if they can, to private education and private tuition. Your Vice-Chancellor, not you, sir, but your predecessor, put it very perceptively when I was last here. He said the education system is abandoned by those who have the means to pursue alternatives. I said that's very loud and clear. I don't know whether anyone in authority will listen to him. And it is only the most deprived who cling to it. And whereas any country with a conscience would do its best by the deprived, they are the ones who need services free of charge, the best services possible. Decision makers do not care about them. Like, and I will mention him, Mr. Lokumandar, who ranted against English in the state system and sent his son to an international school. And when I reprimanded him, he told me sanctimoniously, I told you the midnight folk are very sanctimonious. You think, Mokadda Karanna, what could I do? My wife insisted on it. Is there no hope? I fear not. Now I can understand the despair of Mabel Leighton in Paul Scott's brilliant analysis of the failure of the British imperialism, and her lament that I thought there might be some changes, but there aren't. It's all exactly as it was when I first saw it more than 40 years ago. It is 40 years now for me. I can't even be angry. But someone ought to be. And I hope all of you will be. I fear that your Vice-Chancellor's observation will prove even more apposite in the years to come. There was a brief moment 3 years ago when COVID first hit us, when I thought the system would bestir itself to provide alternatives, but nothing of the sort happened. So let me end now with what I think should have happened. Given that the onset of COVID saw closure of schools and universities, and they are still largely closed. They come to life occasionally and then close down again, and then in the first term they have a sports meet, so no one goes to school. This has happened for the last 30 years. Okay? There should be efforts to develop curricula appropriate for a time when face-to-face contact would not be easy. This required, as I started by saying, thinking as learners do, and tailoring the content of curricula as well as systems to convey to the abilities of learners, not teachers. This was particularly important in the context of 2020, in which learners had limited access to teachers. But our decision makers did not think on these lines. Now understand that the key to this was simple materials that are not just user-friendly, but that will allow learners to gain not only knowledge, but also relevant thinking skills on their own. And let me give you another anecdote. Way back in the early 90s, I managed to struggle and get English literature back as a subject at ordinary level. It had been abolished in the 80s. And I was asked by the NI to produce a teacher's guide, which I did, together with Dinley Fernando. I think it was Dinley, I can't remember. And then I suddenly found the NI was producing another teacher's guide. So I asked the head, what's happened? And he said, no, you know, the teachers were complaining that your guide doesn't only ask questions, it doesn't give answers. That is what they wanted. But the NI should have had the guts to show them how to use a questioning mode to get the students to think, to evoke language from the students. No. Instead, they were told, and I love this, that amongst other things, you know, you had to really know the hidden meaning of Bells for John Whiteside's Daughter. That the feathers the geese stop represent snow. Where they got that particular idea, I don't know. The poem is a lovely poem about the death of a little girl who the geese followed. It's very moving. It doesn't need you to think that the feathers are snow. Feathers are not generally snow, as far as I know. But anyway, that's the type of thing the NI did. Provision should have been made for guidance, but this had to be minimal, and it could have been provided through small group clusters. The cluster system that many countries used to deal with COVID, where students could learn from each other in addition to getting guidance at a higher level. I recall vividly the brilliant initiative of Orani Jans in insisting that Guild students did a project and dramatized this. And students were marvelous. This provided a great motivating factor. Students in the remotest of areas worked hard together, and the synergy they developed, one of Orani's favorite words, which is not used in education, it should be, led to rapid learning even by those who had been initially very weak. Such a system was important for youngsters in rural communities and could have been activated in 2020 when communication was difficult. But the panacea authorities developed of online contact was a joke, because in many instances it was not even possible. I mean, I'm now, along with Taranga, doing a course for Sabaragamu online. And half the students cannot get connected. You know, there must be alternate methods. But I have noted those rural communities are not of any concern to our decision makers. Rural communities where they don't have ready access to internet, where connectivity is bad even when they do, those are not of interest to the decision makers. Their more motivation is to have their children advance to educational systems different from those the majority of our children have to undergo. They are not like Orani or one of the academics I remember most fondly from my time at this university, Professor IRCHSS, who started an accountancy course in English medium only, and noted that one had failed as a teacher if one's students did not end up better than oneself. Another of the leading lights of Jayewardenepura in the 90s, which is why Arjun Alva had described it as the cutting edge of the university system. To continue in the midst of a country in desperate plight with the positives this university could develop, I will revert to the last time I was here in December and highlight again that initiative begun by a wonderful librarian and Madhu to work through the national library system to promote English through entertainment for early learners. I mean, it says so much. What do children want? How can they learn through it? So Nayana and Madhu set up this great system. And I'm just sad it's not being replicated all over. They're trying. They're doing a great job. The project which has been developed suggests, after 2 decades, an effective approach to extending opportunities and means of learning. It can be taken further at all levels to fill gaps that the state had sedulously ignored for several decades. Costs would be minimal if innovators such as the personnel here responsible were given the initiative, were given a free hand. I can only hope that with the support of the hierarchy here, which really supported them very well, and the other players who have combined to take this forward, from the governor of the Northern Province to the chairman of the National Library Sword. And I hope somehow some people in the Ministry or the NI will get involved in this and take action, not sit passively and say, oh, we should take action. I hope this initiative will lead to the proliferation of user-friendly materials and personnel able to use them productively. Thank you.
To deliver the vote of thanks, I cordially invite Dr. Tharaka Anand, the Secretary of IRCHSS 2023.
As we come to the end of the inaugural session of the IRCHSS 2023, I have the pleasant task of delivering vote of thanks to this August gathering here. First, I must say, as in our conference theme, we have been going through many testing times from the beginning of organizing this conference. However, we decided to make it a successful event under any circumstances, and as you witness, today we have turned impossibilities into a possibility with the support we received all of you. First, on behalf of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, let me extend very hearty vote of thanks for our chief guest, Mr. Tetsuya Yamada, Chief Representative of Sri Lanka Office, Japan International Cooperation Agency, for gracing the inauguration and sharing his thoughts with this august audience. A big thank you to Professor Rajiv Vijayasinghe, our keynote speaker, for delivering a very interesting speech on Box of Delights. Let me express my gratitude to Professor Upul Subasinghe, Acting Vice Chancellor of the University of Sri Jayewardenepura, and the guest of honor for the help extended for every activity of our conference. I bow my head in gratitude to Professor Shirantha Heenkendar, Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences and the advisor of our conference, for his continual guidance, encouragement, and dedication to make this event a successful one. Next, I would like to thank our plenary speakers, Professor Chamalina Halage, Professor Andrew Lyon, and Dr. Rajesh Bhatt, for accepting our invitations to share their invaluable knowledge with us. At the beginning of organizing this conference, we provided a comprehensive guide for the researchers called Field to the Publication by conducting a series of workshops on abstract writing, philosophy of research, research designing, and critical evaluation of a research paper. Therefore, I take this opportunity to thank contribution of Venerable Professor Pinnawala Sangasumanathero, Professor Jayadeva Uyangoda, Professor Sasanka Pereira, and Dr. Patrick Roberts for conducting these workshops and providing guidance, especially for our younger researchers. I take this opportunity to extend my thanks to deans of other faculties, heads of departments, and the librarian of the university for gracing this event. I would also like to thank the Registrar and the Bursar of the University of Sri Jayewardenepura. My sincere thanks goes to Deputy Bursar and Assistant Bursar of the faculty, all the administrative and non-academic staff for their support and presence in this event. Also, thank you Dr. Madhubhashini Ratnayaka for introducing our keynote speaker. Permit me to mention our appreciation and gratitude to the sponsor of this conference, FRELA, and the media personnel, including the Japuru media of the University of Sri Jayewardenepura. Thank you very much for your support. And I take this opportunity to thank all the chairpersons of the sessions and editorial board members, language editors, paper reviewers, conveners, paper presenters, participants, local and foreign delegates as well. Also, I thank all the supportive staff of the faculty office and departments, especially Professor B.W.R. Damayanti and the team of the CDEP of our faculty for their support in conducting the technical sessions through Zoom platforms. I would also like to thank the student volunteers who have been helping us and the dancing group too. A special thank goes to Ms. Parami and Ms. Kalani, Kanishka and Srishan for helping me for the works of this conference. It is much difficult to mention all the people by names, but everyone who helped for the successfulness of this conference is really appreciated. An event of this dimension cannot happen overnight. The wheels started rolling exactly about 1.5 years ago. It required meticulous planning and execution and eye for details. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by the conference chair, a team of very motivated and dedicated committee members who knew their job and are result-oriented. I am unable to express my thanks enough for the involvement they have shown and the willingness they have expressed to take on the completion of tasks beyond their comfort zones. Dear all, thank you very much, and I'm very proud to be a part of this team. Finally, thank you all for your time and hope you will enjoy the conference and the technical sessions. Thank you very much.